This is the 10-minute version of the Basics of Coaching Effectively by Recognising Different Learning Styles by Annie Page of Essentii, which is me, and it's from a talk that I gave recently at the Smart Way Forward Sports Coaches Conference at Bisham Abbey. What we were looking at was actually the learning styles from Honey and Mumford, and that was developed from work that they did from David Kolb's work in the 1970s. And they identified that there were 4 learning styles, which were activist, which is all about having an experience, the reflectors, which is all about reviewing the experience, the theorists, which was about concluding from the experience, and the pragmatists, which is about planning the next steps. As sports coaches, it's really useful for us to understand ourselves and where we start our learning practices, and therefore our athletes and where they start their learning practices. This means we can engage them at a place that works best for them, rather than just sort of telling people what to do and then wondering why they're not doing it. So as we go through, we're going to look at each style and what it can give us and how we can coach it. So we'll start off with the activists. They very much enjoy the here and now and are very happy to be dominated by immediate experiences, very open-minded, and they're very enthusiastic. You know, they'll try anything once. They love tackling problems by brainstorming, and they're constantly involving themselves with other people. So they're very flexible and open-minded, very happy to have a go, and happy to be exposed to new situations. Very optimistic, and very unlikely to resist change. The other side of the coin for them is the fact that they can actually just do things without thinking about it, or the consequences. They will take unnecessary risks, and they have a tendency to do a lot themselves and could be seen to be hogging the limelight. And they'll get very bored with implementation and consolidation of learning and practices. So how to coach them? Let them do the activity first and work it out as they go. Allow them to experiment and try different approaches. Let them talk about what they're doing and what is and isn't working. And it's after the session you can then start to get them to reflect on what they did, how it worked, and what happened. And then give them the brief points they need for the session for them to think about afterwards. And then before the next session, get them to tell you what worked and what they're going to do next with what they've got. So then we looked at reflectors, and they like to collect their data. They like to have lots of information, both from themselves and from others, and they prefer to really think things through before coming to a conclusion. Their philosophy is actually to be quite cautious. They're very thoughtful people. And they like to have a look at all the angles and implications of something before they actually sort of make a move. They're the people that will take a back seat in discussions. They won't put too much information in. If you ask them a question, they need some space and time to be able to actually think about the answer. So they're very careful, very thorough and methodical, very thoughtful. They are very good at listening to others and assimilating all the information. The problem with that can be sometimes that they spend so long collecting all the data and reflecting, and that they don't actually do anything with it, and they don't like necessarily putting forward their point of view, and they'll hold back from any direct participation, which can make it seem as though they're quite slow to make up their minds and reach decisions. They can be a bit too cautious and perhaps not take quite enough risks. And they won't come across as very assertive, and they're not going to enjoy small talk. So as a coach, what can you do with reflectors? Well, you want to let them observe the exercise. So this is great if you've got a group and you've got an activist. Send them off to do the demonstrations. Activist is happy. Reflector can then sit back and watch and reflect on what they're seeing. Let them know beforehand what the session is going to be so that they've got time to plan it and prepare for it, and give them the space to be able to do that. If you ask them a question, give them some time to think about the answer and what's going to happen next. So, on to our theorists. They're very logical. They like facts and figures, and they like to know principles and the models of what they're working within and why they're doing the session that they're doing. They like to know if something makes sense and how it fits with the bigger picture. So very logical, vertical thinkers, very rational and objective, very good at asking the probing questions, and they do have a very disciplined approach. The other side of this tends to be the fact that they can actually end up as perfectionists, and therefore won't necessarily move forward with something if they don't think it's going to be perfect. And they can give them quite a low tolerance for anybody who is a bit uncertain about something or has a bit of disorder around them. So they can be quite full of sort of should and ought and musts, very sort of rule set driven. So as a coach, as a sports coach, how can you coach people who are more theorist driven or more start their learning process at a more theory driven place? We want to explain why you're doing a particular session. You want to give them the background, the research, the whys of what you're doing the session for, what it's going to give them, and you want to encourage them to go and do their own research, find out and test out their own theories, and let them know that you want those shared with other people and with yourself. So let them go and find what actually can work and has worked in the past, and the reasons why. Why is a big question for the theorists. They like that one. Okay, moving quickly on to the pragmatists. Okay, so pragmatists, well, they do like to search out new ideas, and they do like to take the first opportunity to experiment with actually putting into place application of those ideas. So they're the sort of people, if you've got somebody who's been on a course, they're the people that are coming back saying, right, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and wants to implement all of it immediately. So they do like to act quickly, and they're very confident about doing that. They're very down to earth, so they're keen to test things out in practice, practical and realistic, can be very businesslike and get straight to the point, and they are quite technique orientated. So the other side of that can mean that sometimes they get a bit too task orientated and not very people orientated. They're not up with anybody who does waffle. That's completely rejected, and they tend to get quite impatient if there's quite an open-ended discussion going on. If they can't see the practical application of the theory, it's not going to happen. They're not interested. So as a coach, what can you do? Well, you need to be clear how the session you're doing is going to be linked to the game or the competition. It needs to have that practical application. You need to make it as close to real life as possible. And what you want to do is be asking them how they are going to use what they've learned in their next competition. Keep to proven techniques that they know that work for them, and keep in mind their goals when you're planning your session so that you can kind of give them the reasons behind what it is that you're doing. So you, as a coach, one of those styles will have sat better with you than the other ones. Do you understand where you're starting from? And then you can actually start to work out where your athletes are starting from. You can start to then gauge where you're going to get maybe stuck or where you're going to actually get on quite well. So it may be that if you have competing learning styles, perhaps maybe you're more of an activist and they're more of a theorist, you just want them to go and do something and try it out first. They're going to want the why. And this can sometimes therefore build up tension and make for quite an ineffective session because you're both going to be arguing about the point for what you want. So you need to understand that this is about just different places to start learning, and you as the sports coach need to be the person who gets flexible and moves over and goes into their space and starts from where they need to go. Also, you could end up, say you're both reflectors, just talking a lot about what you're going to do and what it will give you, but not actually doing it. So there's pros and cons for whether you're both the same or whether you're both separate. And basically you as coach are the one that's got to get flexible and change your approach in order to get the best from your athlete. So if you've got a team or you've got a mixture of people or you're not quite sure what learning style people are coming from, then actually what you need to do is start with the why. Give the theorists their piece of information, then them with you. Then you want to give the what, then the how, and then get them to do the session. In this way you'll capture everybody, because to be honest, the activists aren't going to listen to a word you've said before they've done something, but the theorists aren't going to do what you want them to do until they know why they're doing it. So start with the why, the what, the how, the do. Then you repeat it afterwards so that everybody has got all the information you need. And in this way you can make sure that you're using the learning styles to coach effectively and engage the people and the athletes that you're working with. So good luck and have fun.